have a joke that I like to tell. Since you started that wonderful tradition. So the mama broom says to the papa broom, honey, we're going to have a little whisk broom. And the papa broom says to the mama broom, but how is that possible? We haven't even swept together. That's a cute one. That's a cute joke. So you can ask me a question, Steve, because I have more stupid jokes like that.
If she's supposed to say her name.
Yeah, so
My name, Martha, also known as Muffy, friend. I am
Middle name?
Janet, Martha Janet, after my Aunt Janet. And Jack and Dillis were my grandparents.
You were born.
I was born in 1953. We're doing,
And where?
well, wait a
I
minute.
was, okay, yeah.
So, how did you meet your husband?
I met my husband. His sister was a good friend of mine. I was working at a daycare center, and she was working at a daycare center, and she kept telling me about her brother who was coming to town to go to law school, and the more she talked about him, the more I became very curious about meeting him. And because he sounded like he was somebody I might like. And the story goes, we finally did meet. He did come to Boston to go to law school, and I did meet him, and we went on one date, and we did not go on our second date for 3 more years. So there was a 3-year gap between our first date and our second date. But all things worked out, and we got married in 1982, so we've been married 31 years, and we have 3 children.
Yeah, tell me about them.
Our son is John James Friend Smith. All our children have the last name of Friend Smith. My last name is Friend, and Ed's last name is Smith. And so it's Friend Smith like blacksmith with no hyphen. And he's 34. And our older daughter is Augusta Dillis Friend Smith, and our younger daughter is Sejal Madeline Friend Smith. And we went from 0 kids to 3 kids in about 20 months. We had our 2 daughters were born to us, and our son was adopted by us in between the 2 births. So we went from no kids to 3 kids very fast, and that was hard. Those were difficult years, but we all made it through. And
Where did the name Madeline come from?
it is Ed's mother's middle name.
Okay.
Yep, so that's a family name.
And tell me something about your memories of the farm, or Uncle Jack, or the other uncles. I mean, your
They would be my great
grandfather,
uncles,
Uncle
yeah.
Jack. And it was one thing that I'm interested in is sort of the dynamic between Janet and Anne. It seems like they were real close friends, or, well, I mean, not to pun, but they were very close, but there also sort of a little bit of competition between them. I got the feeling about that from Anne.
They were very different. I mean, my mother and her only sibling, Janet, were very different, personality-wise. I don't think I ever really understood their relationship terribly well, to be honest. I mean, I think they loved each other a lot. They were each other's only sibling, but I think there was a lot of competition. I think I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say anything on camera, actually, to be honest.
All right. Do you remember being at the farm and?
We went to the farm when we were kids. I have 6 siblings. My parents had 7 children, pretty bang, bang, bang. They had a lot of kids. And we lived in Nottingham, New Hampshire at the time. We grew up there. All but my youngest sister, Celeste, were born and raised on the Nottingham farm. And in the summers, we would go up to the East Elsted farm once a summer. And for a weekend, perhaps. I don't think we ever stayed much longer than that. But I think we loved going there. It was almost like a magic place. I don't like to use the word magic, it gets used a lot. But for us, it was just something that was, oh God, it was very special. The farm itself was just full of nooks and crannies and places to hide and little wonderful, you had a a bedroom around the side, and you would go into these little buildings, and there would be these little, like, fantasy rooms. It was like a fairy house for me, anyway. I thought the East Alsted place was very, very cool. And that you would walk down that beautiful road to Warren Pond and take a swim. And that was the only contact we had with you and so many of our cousins. My mother, Anne, was the oldest of all the first cousins, like Ted and Sarah, and you are my mother's first cousins, but you are more of my generation. So she was always this generation older than all of you, and you were all our age. So that was kind of this interesting little thing. Because your brother John and I were the same age, and yet, he was my mother's first cousin. So, but I loved the trips to East Alsted. I just loved them. And when it got sold, when it left the family, my mother cried and cried and cried.
That's interesting.
Yeah. She was very heartbroken, I think, would be the right word to say. She was heartbroken. I think East Alsted meant everything to her. Because her childhood, adolescent summers had been there, I guess. I guess they spent a lot of time there.
It meant a lot to all of us.
It meant a lot to all of you, and it meant a lot to her. And when she was heartbroken when it left the family.
Yeah. Who else has questions?
Yes.
I understand that you're a friend, but your mother was a Spurr, and you come to the Spurr family reunions, and you are a Spurr. What does it mean to be a Spurr to you?
Well, it means being a part of this huge extended family, which is pretty cool. And, it's really fun to make these connections every 8 years, 4 years. I mean, some of Ted lives near, but we see much more of him and whatnot. But I think it's very cool to be part of something bigger and to feel very connected to something bigger. An African-American friend of mine years ago who had been raised poor and really had no idea who his ancestors were because there was no way of really knowing that information. Descendants of slaves weren't privileged enough to have that information. And he said, you don't even know how lucky you are. You just take it for granted that you know who your ancestors are. But not everybody gets to know who their ancestors are. And so it's very important to feel like you're part of a web, I think, of people that are all interconnected. On my father's side, he was the friend. He also felt very strongly about that, those family connections. When he died 3 years ago, his dying wish, well, he had set this all up long before he died, that this is what he wanted. When he died, he wanted to be cremated. He wanted all of his progeny, his children and grandchildren, and his one remaining brother to get on a bus and drive around to all the graveyards in New England where all of his ancestors were buried, and we would sprinkle some of his ashes on all of these graves.
This is Dick Friend.
This is my father,
Your
Dick
father.
Friend. Yeah. And so that's what we did. He died when I was in Bolivia, but so they waited until Augusta and I came back from Bolivia, and we did that bus ride, and we took a bus all around, and we sprinkled his ashes on all of the graves of his ancestors. And he knew exactly who they were and where they were buried, and we knew exactly what to do. He had laid it all out. So I think it's just really important to feel like you are connected to a bigger family. It's a privilege. It's not something that everybody gets to have.
Is that something that you would leave in writing? For instance, the graves that you went to, so that progeny 5 or 10 generations from now, when they're viewing this on Mars, could say, we know where they're buried on that planet?
Would I do it? You mean,
Yeah.
Would I record it?
Well, now we know that you did it, so
Right.
Do you think you would do that?
It's a pretty awesome thing to do.
It would be great if you
Yeah.
would do it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. The last thing I did before I left for Bolivia, my father wanted one of his children to go and do the route with him so that we knew where all these graves were.
Yeah.
So I did it. He said, oh, you're much too busy. You're getting ready. I said, no, I think I can do that. So that was the last time he and I ever had together. I drove, and we just drove around, and he knew where every grave was in every graveyard, and they were spread all over Gloucester, Massachusetts, and some in Kingston, New Hampshire. It was kind of this, I don't know, maybe 100 square miles or something.
What,
We
8 or
spent
9 graveyards, right?
8 or 9 graveyards. He was 85 years old at the time, but we would get to every graveyard, and we would get out and we would walk around, and he knew where every grave was. And there's one graveyard in Gloucester where there's a Spurr gravestone very near one of his friend gravestones. Coincidentally, actually. So I knew where all the graves were, and it was the last time he and I ever had together. I had a phone conversation with him the night he died, but other than that, I never saw him again. So I'm really grateful that I did that with him
It's
before-
amazing.
before
Ty.
I left.
Oh, it's-
Yeah.
I have one other question.
Yep.
The Nottingham farm, is that owned by all of the children of Dick and Ann, or is it?
Well, there's
what's
7
the-
children of Dick and Ann. 5 of us own it now. 2, Dillis and John got bought out when my parents died.
Are you gonna, what do you expect to do with it ultimately?
We
haven't
sure would
decided.
like to keep it. It's a big piece of property. It takes a lot to maintain. Gwen is living there right now, and that's, if one of us is not living there and taking care of it, it's virtually impossible to maintain. But she's doing that right now, but she doesn't know what her future plans are. She's not working at the moment, and she doesn't know. But she just had another grandchild. Things change. So we very much would love to keep that Nottingham
Yeah.
property in the family if we can, but it's very expensive and very hard to do.
Yeah,
So it's like East Alsted, sooner or later
Sure.
somebody let it go,
Yeah.
right? Because it was just so hard to keep it.
Yeah.
So we don't know. I mean, my children and my children's generation, they loved that place the way we all loved East Alsted, and you all really loved it because you spent a lot of time there. That's how our generation, my kids' generation, feels about it.
yeah.
But, make it very sad. We were married there. Ed and I were married there. My daughters want to get married there.
Maggie was married.
Maggie was married there. Richard was married there. Lisa
Yeah.
was married there. I mean, a lot of us got married out in the field. And,
So that's more meaningful to you than the Elsted farm, probably.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It has much more history with our family, the Friend family, than
Yeah.
East Alsted. East Alsted was a wonderful place to go and visit. But Nottingham has been, in our family for many generations. Many.
Right.